Hello everyone, this is Michele Mitrani and welcome to another of my interviews. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Joanna Penn, a New York Times and USA Today best-selling independent author. She has written 21 books and sold over 500,000 copies in 84 countries and 5 languages. She is also an international professional speaker and award-winning entrepreneur. Voted as one of the Guardian UK Top 100 Creative Professionals in 2013. Hi, Joanna. Thank you for taking the time to answer these questions for us. Now, your website, thecreativepen.com, is a great resource for writers and authors who are looking to craft great stories and format them in a professionally looking products. Now, this website alone has more than 1,000 text articles and over 100 hours of audio information. Can I ask you, what made you write the very first article and share the very first bit of information that for so many years have helped the indie community?
Oh, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, Michele. It's lovely to talk to you. And yes, so I started the Creative Pen in December 2008. So as we talk, that's over 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
When I wrote that first post. So first of all, I would say to people, some of this takes time. It's like writing, this is not a short-term career. So what happened was basically I was miserable in my job. I used to implement accounts payable into large corporates. And I just, my creative side was sort of stunted, and I just didn't know what I was doing with my life, really. It just seemed like, go to work and then go home and watch TV and, see friends. And then I was like, well, what have I actually achieved with my time except just paying for stuff? So I really wanted to start creating things. So the first book I wrote is now available as Career Change. And I wrote that as a way to try and change my own life. And in the process of writing it, and I was living in Australia at the time, and in the process of writing it, I looked at the traditional publishing model. This was sort of 2007, and I just was like, what is going on here? Like, you have to run after agents, and then you have to wait all this time, and I just don't want to wait all this time. I want to get my book out. So I actually self-published in 2007, 2008, before the Kindle, before ebooks, before audiobooks,
before it was easy to self-publish books. Yes,
exactly. And I did a print book, and then basically I made so many mistakes in that process of self-publishing, and I didn't know anything about marketing, and so essentially what I decided to do was start a blog in order to share my journey and to talk about the self-publishing movement, which was really just getting started, and also about what I was learning around book marketing. And so really I was trying to help other people not get ripped off. And like I said, that was December 2008, and in 2009 the Kindle really started to happen, and the early Kindle millionaires in America started to sort of make their money, and then I was like, wow, this is great. This indie movement is really taking off, and that's when I started the podcast and started writing more. So I would also say to your audience, in Italy, what we're seeing across the world, I think, is a ripple effect. So the American indie movement started really 2008, 2009. I would say in Britain, we're still struggling in Britain, but I would say it was probably more like maybe 2014, 2015. So a good couple of years after America. And then now we're starting to see Germany happening. I don't know about Italy, but like France is well behind.
yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Again, I had some interviews with very famous, like they achieved success Italian indie authors, and they themselves said that it's a smaller market compared with the Anglo-Saxon one. It's something, it is definitely happening because these people I spoke with, they are in this kind of game. Now it's been like 5 to 6 years, and they are slowly seeing result building up.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think over time things just change. And so it's basically coming back to your question, I put that first blog post up. I started that site because I just wanted to help other people avoid the mistakes I made. And I think that would be a recommendation if people do want to start a blog. It has to be something that sustains your interest over the long term. So for me, the Creative Penn, it's more centered around my own journey. My other site is JF Penn for my fiction. Both of
Right.
them around my own journey. So if you center your if you start a blog called How to Self-Publish, then you can only really talk about one
Mm,
thing.
mm.
Whereas if you start a site around your own name or something similar, then you can grow over time and people will keep coming back because they want to hear from you and what you're doing.
Right. So of course you have to be, like, let's say, sustainable in the way you are producing products, and of course in order to do that you have to be interested in what you are writing. Now let's flash forward to the present. Joanna, you have written so many books in these past years, a number of non-fiction works, the arcane action adventure thrillers, the London crime thriller series, and so on and so forth. So I guess this might be an hard question to ask, but if you could spend time with one character from one of your books, whom would she or he be, and what would you do during that day?
Well, it's funny because, of course, when you're writing fiction, you are spending all your time with your characters
Yeah.
anyway. So you're kind of in there. But, and Morgan Sierra, my main character in my Arcane series, she's kind of my alter ego. So I probably wouldn't hang out with her because, she's kind of me. But there's one character, Martin, who is the sort of head archivist or the librarian of the Arcane organization,
Right.
and he has access to like everything in the world, including all the secret documents in the Vatican and all the things that all the countries hide. He's kind of hacked in there and he's got access, and he's got this cool device where it's like a virtual reality space where you can go in and find out all this information. And
Right.
so I would probably go hang out in his lab area and get in his VR device and just find out really cool hidden things about the world.
Doing
Because that's
some,
what
yeah,
interests me. Yeah,
doing some damages.
yeah, well, maybe not some damage, but some research. I mean, one of the reasons I love writing fiction is because I love the research. Like right now, I'm plotting a series around maps and cartography. So I'm learning all this stuff around the history of maps and these really weird maps that people have drawn, and islands that are made up completely, and things that people have done with maps over the years. And I'm just loving it. It's so interesting. And that will become the basis for my next thriller series. I don't know how yet because I'm just in that research phase, but I really enjoy learning and then turning what I learn into story. So, of course, I have a ton of my stories are set in Italy. I have lots, I keep going back to the Vatican. You've got lots of saints over there and interesting grottos and ossuaries. So I have a lot of Italy in my books, and a lot of that comes from traveling. So yeah, I would definitely go do some more research with Martin at the Arcane HQ.
And maybe researchers on the field like expecting you to go maybe to Rome or someone else, and not being only a tourist but an author, like looking around saying, oh, that street, that could work very well in this scene of my book or something like that. And when you said something like the map and like the volume of work that authors sometimes put in the word building, so to create the word, you made me also think about another fellow indie author that I believe you are familiar with, Bengali, the young Bengali,
Yes.
another young, I think he's 29 or something like that, British author. He actually wrote a very interesting blog post about word building, and something that you said really resonated with also something he said. Now, let's talk again about your book, but this one is a bit particular with respect of the others because it's one of those books that you wrote with another author. So my next question would be, how was it like to collaborate with Jay Thorne, which is the author I'm talking about, when you were writing Rise and Gods? Differences or any particularity that made it look better, worse, or simply more weird than writing by yourself?
Yeah, so Risen Gods is set in New Zealand, and the kind of premises that with the earthquakes and natural disasters that happen in New Zealand are actually the gods coming back, the Maori gods, the indigenous, well, not the indigenous people, but the people who were there before the British came.
Right, right.
So basically, that's the premise. And yeah, with Jay's a horror writer. He's a man. I've never met him. We met online, so I'd never co-written with anyone before. So basically there are two main characters in the book, a male character and a female character. It's not a romance, but there is entanglement. But basically originally we had said, Jay said, well, I'll write the guy and I will write the girl, and we will just write different scenes and then they'll come together at some point and it will be like that. And that was what we had thought would happen. But actually it was really interesting because we ended up kind of switching. So I want, that's one, a lot of people always say, how do you write a man if you're a woman, or how do you write an African American if you're white, or, but we're authors, we make stuff up, right? And people are people. And I don't think we're that different in the end, we're actually quite similar. So what ended up happening was, I ended up writing a chapter about kayaking across the strait, and there are sort of these sea monster things, and Jay ended up writing some other bits. And so what was really interesting about it was we wrote it really fast. So we wrote the book in 3 weeks.
Wow, 3 weeks?
Yeah, well,
Wow.
because I'll tell you why. So basically, the idea was mine originally, and then we fleshed it out in an outline. And then Jay is in the East Coast of America, and I'm in Britain. So I would get up, write a couple of thousand words, and then he would wake up 5 hours later, take my stuff, and he would write another 2,000 words. So we kept each other going, because if the other one didn't write their words, then the other person the next day was going to be like, well, why haven't you done your work? So that was great, because it really helped us get the work done. I also really like it was 1 + 1 = 3 rather than 2, because some of the ideas we came up with were much better than the ideas we had on our own. So that was really good. And then, of course, we had the kind of cross promotion aspect. So it was really brilliant. And we are talking about other potential collaborations in the future. Jay does a lot of co-writing, and I think he's so good at it because he's a musician, and musicians, of course, are used to working with other musicians. That's what you do when you're a musician. Well, mostly. And he's been in bands and things. And so for me, it was very good to have that experience. And especially just on self-doubt, something that authors feel all the time, is my writing good enough? And I don't want anyone to see what I'm writing. But you kind of have to get over that when you're co-writing.
Right.
So I think that really helped too. But it was certainly an interesting project, and one that I will be doing again in the future.
I don't care what you say, though. In 3 weeks writing a book, you're a machine. You're not a person.
It was between two of us, and it's only. I
you
think
guys are machine in general.
It's a short book. It is a short book.
Okay, yeah, and this kind of reminds me when it's like you're playing a tennis match. If your opponent is good or better, you are like pulled to be like better and better. So basically, that's something that happened. It's like, let's call it tennis effect. So you were able to crunch these thousands and thousands of words per day because you wanted to keep maybe the others or their standards, so your standards yourself very high. That was very, very interesting. I didn't know all of this behind the scene of the Rising Gods. Now let's change a bit the subject and let's go over to you directly, Joanna. What was the most constructive criticism you ever received, and why was it useful?
Well, I have always paid for professional editors. I believe that you shouldn't listen to people who are not good at editing in your genre. So the constructive criticism I've had has always been from professionals. I think one of the biggest issues amongst new authors in particular, if they're part of writing groups, is that they take criticism from authors who've never published, and authors who've published and who don't like their genre. So if you're a romance author and you're getting a critique from someone who writes literary fiction, then that's pointless. That's not constructive. And I see so much of that happening. So the best constructive criticism I've received and receive on a regular basis is from my professional editors. And sometimes that's around story. Story structure is such a massive part of fiction. If you get story structure wrong, then the reader just won't resonate with it. There are when you watch a movie and the ending's just like, oh no, that's just so wrong.
That doesn't make sense. Yes.
Yeah, that structural issue. So I think constructive criticism around structure is so important. And then, editors will notice things like how the clauses of your language might be repetitive, or repetitive words you use, or things you've missed in terms of character. So I can't really say anything specific, but in general, I think taking criticism from professionals is the way to improve. And they should be finding new things with every book, and you should be becoming a better writer with every book. And of course, I'm just writing novel 14. And of course, I'm a better writer than I was with novel number 1. But I'm still getting feedback as to how I can improve. For example, I'm reading a book on using emotion and trying to get much more emotional in my writing, or not emotional in the writing, trying to stir an emotional response in the reader. That's one of the things I'm aiming for, as I become a better writer. So definitely invest in professionals who can help you improve, and don't listen to people who don't like your genre and who are not pro editors.
Lovely. So constructive criticism is very important indeed. Of course, strive to be better and better, and of course, constants are all things that you touched and are very important in the writing process and the editing process, and so on and so forth. Now, let's talk a bit about self-publishing. This is a general question, but I really want to have your feedback on this. On this regard, how do you see self-publishing 10 years from now?
Well, I think we're already at a point where things have diverged a lot. So I think I don't call myself a self-published author. I call myself an independent author because I run a multi-six-figure company. I don't have employees, but I have about 15 different contractors who do work for me. That includes a number of editors, cover designers, accountants, virtual assistants.
A real team, yes.
Yeah, a team. So I think the one thing that is becoming clearer and clearer is that there is a kind of dichotomy or a split between people who are self-publishing for a personal reason. So it might be a personal project, their grandfather's notebook, the one novel that they have in them, versus the people who are doing this for a living, who are professional independent authors, who, are basically running a small publishing house. Right. So I think that we're going to see that continue. And in fact, we're already seeing a lot of the top indie authors publishing other authors. So in 10 years' time, I think you're going to see, certainly in America, Britain, Australia, that some of the biggest indie author names of 2017 are now running publishing houses or running movie studios or running, the outsiders become the mainstream. We see this over and over again. Apple used to be the outsider, and now it's the mainstream. I also think 10 years we're going to see, there are a number of companies invested in streaming internet at a high rate across the whole world. So by 2020, there will be 5 billion more people on the internet than there are today. And those people will be accessing the internet through smartphones and mobile devices, not laptops and computers. So to me, in 10 years' time, I'm very excited because I fully expect to be selling books all over the world, and, in English potentially, because of course, if you look at what Skype's doing, what Google Translate is doing, in a couple of years' time, you and I could be talking in English and people could be listening in Italian. And I think the same thing will happen with translation of books. I'm entirely expecting that people will just be able to click a button on their device or whatever they'll do, and it will change the language of the book. I think we're going to see a lot of, these type of global technologies, communication, connectivity will get rid of a lot of the barriers. So I see a lot more content, a lot more professionalism, but also tools like AI, artificial intelligence with machine learning will improve the quality of discoverability. So we all struggle right now with people finding our books, but I believe that the book itself should be metadata or is metadata, and the machine learning AI devices and tools will make it easier for people to find our books, because these tools will enable them to find a book that satisfies the emotional journey that they want. So someone's read, a book by a big name author and they want the same experience. The AI machine learning device will be able to find them that book that will give them that same feeling, that same rush, even though they might never have heard of that author. So I think we're in a time of very blunt instruments when it comes to marketing. It's like type in 7 keywords. I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. So I see all these things changing. And I mean, I'm very, very positive about the future of creative work, of self-publishing or independent publishing. And also, I think that increasingly readers don't care. I don't think the market cares how you publish. The publishing aspect is the tiniest part of the process. The biggest part of the process is writing and marketing. So I would hope that in 10 years' time, the question of how do you publish is not even important.
I see. Technology is going to be a big ally of authors, and generally speaking of people that want to sell a product or to share an ideas and so on and so forth. Let's go back at you now, Joanna, and tell us about your plans for the future. Any new book coming up soon, or any new project that you are excited about?
Well, as we speak, towards the end of January 2017, I actually have a novel out next week.
Of course,
End of
one.
Days.
You Machine, as I said.
Well, End of Days is, well, as it sounds, a bit of an apocalyptic book in my Arcane series. So that's set very much in Israel and some other places, but a lot of fun there. So End of Days is coming out, and then I am working on this map trilogy, as I mentioned. So that I don't know when that will come out, because I have a couple of other things to do before then. I'm going to have a book set in New Orleans, so I'm traveling there in March and going to do something there around voodoo and that type of thing that you find in that area of the world. And for my non-fiction, I'm looking at a book on the shadow side, which is, a lot of us self-censor our writing. We don't say what's in our head because what will people think of us? And obviously some people get over that very well, but most writers, I find, especially at the beginning, and especially if they're good girls like me, or perhaps you're a good boy as well, but we don't necessarily write down everything that's inside of us, because it might be too dark, or we might have something in our some stuff in our past that is hurtful, or so I want to write about how you get over self-censorship as a writer, and how do you use your darkness in your writing. So I'm going to be talking to a lot of horror writers, and looking at all that, and sex. So basically sex and violence. How do we use the darker side of our humanity to make our books more real? So a really interesting topic, and one that hopefully also will help my own writing. And if people are interested in my darker books, check out Desecration, which is the first in my London Psychic series. That's the first book I stopped self-censoring. So it's a lot darker.
Lots of interesting things for you on the horizon. An interesting thing is that even though you are a very successful author, you never stop writing and or researching, and more generally speaking, to try to form yourself a bit better by time.
Oh, well, it's fun.
It is fun. Plus,
I spent so long in a job I hated that I love doing this. I love what I do now. So every day I'm just like, I love my work. It's brilliant.
This is your element. This is who you are. That's a beautiful thing. Okay, so John, let's finish up with what I will call a rather profound question. When your time on this world is up, how would you like people to remember Joanna Penn?
Well, it's funny because I'm two people. I'm Joanna Penn and I'm JF Penn. So Joanna Penn is the one that helps other people on the creativepenn.com and writes nonfiction. And I had a goal a couple of years ago. I kind of wrote down, I want to help 1 million people put 1 million books into the world. So, and I love getting emails that say, you really helped me, have the strength to put my book out there. And so for me, I definitely want to be remembered as the person who helped that many people get their books out in the world.
Right.
And for JF Penn, I guess I just want to touch people with my stories. And, on a bigger level, I do want to leave a legacy, like a financial legacy for my family. So this is, an important part of being an author entrepreneur is that the money can be very, very good. And I'm absolutely intending to set up my estate so that it benefits my family when I'm gone. And for me, that's something that's really important as well. It's kind of thinking, okay, with copyright, which goes on for 50 to 70 years after I'm dead, then how can I make sure that my work still benefits the people who I want, who I love, and potentially a lot more. So I like to tell people about Beatrix Potter, who was a children's writer, and she actually bought the Lake District in Britain, which is one of the most beautiful areas, and she bought the land and then she gave it to the British people. So if anyone does travel to England and do the tourist thing, the Lake District is what it is because one author bought the land with the proceeds of her books and gave it to the British people. So that's the type of thing that inspires me to leave a legacy after I'm gone. But while I'm here, I'm going to have a lot of fun and write a lot more books.
Yes, for sure. You will keep being a machine and feed us with lovely, beautiful, and thrilling books. Okay, Joanna, I just would like to take a few seconds to really, really thank you on behalf of the Italian indie communities, my platform, for taking the time to answering these questions for us. And I want to wish you a gigantic good luck to you and to your future projects.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me on the show. And if your audience are interested, come along to thecreativepenn.com, pen with a double N. And I have a podcast. It's in English, but if anyone's interested, there's over 300 episodes now. And I'm on Twitter @thecreativepenn with a double N if anyone has any questions.